something happening here. But what it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop, children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
Salutations, good morning, and welcome New Haven, welcome Connecticut, welcome America, welcome the world. This is your host, Jesse Turner, on the Readman Truth to Power Hour on 103.5 WNHH, New Haven, Connecticut, the best radio in the state. Here we have no commercials over here. None at all. So this is just pure truth kinds of stuff. And I love this station and I love this show, and I enjoyed listening to the Babs this morning. I love listening to Paul Bass, all of our stations. So I can't mention them all, but let me tell you, you should have your radio tuned to 103.5 FM New Haven if you want some fun, truth, music, and life. It's a great place to be. Today, I'm going to be talking to a guest who is a dear friend, a colleague. I don't know, maybe 20, 25 years. It's been a long time. We were babies at the university at one time. And so I'm talking to Dr. Shelley Jones. I'm going to ask her to introduce herself. But what you should know right now is I have the purple on because this is about majesty. And you have to understand, we have majesty in the house today. We have the queen of culturally relevant mathematics in this country. When everybody was talking about it in literature and history, we could all do those things, you know. But in math, nobody ever thought about it until this woman came up with Woman Who's Counts. Dr. Jones, can you introduce yourself to us and share a little bit about your passions?
I will, but first let me just say thank you so much, Jesse Turner, for inviting me here today. Yes, I'm Shelley Jones, and I'm a proud 30-plus year education veteran at CCSU, Central Connecticut State University, now for almost 25 years, as you said, Jesse. Well, actually for 20 years. Anyway, but I started off as a middle school teacher in Bridgeport, Connecticut. I taught for some years at Louis Muniz Marin School, and then I went on to do some math administration work in Ansonia and in Middletown, Connecticut. I went off to the Illinois State University where I acquired my PhD in mathematics education. And so I started out 7-12. So I started out in secondary. And then when I went back to school to Illinois State for my doctorate, I decided to focus on K-8 because I had taught middle school. And one thing I knew for sure is that students, once they got to middle school, I knew they were coming from elementary school, and I knew I wanted to impact those teachers. And so I started to teach elementary school and teachers, pre-service teachers for elementary school. And I never looked back. I love doing it. I love teaching the basics and having pre-service teachers really think about the math that they're teaching and not just try to teach to a test. And so, yes, 30 plus years. Jesse, I've been with you before on the CCSU TEDx. You invited me to do that. So you've presented me with lots of opportunities. In terms of my publications, myself and my colleagues, Lou Matthews and Yolanda Parker, we wrote a chapter in the book called The Brilliance of Mathematics, Beyond Numbers and Toward New Discourse. And from that work, you see the work in back of me, Engaging Culturally Relevant Math Tasks. So we went from a chapter in a book to our own 2 series books, one for elementary and one for secondary, because we really believe that when students are engaged in culturally relevant math tasks, they're going to be empowered and they're going to want to know the answers to the questions rather than say, when will I ever use this? And then not last but not least, but the other book that we may talk a little bit about today is Women Who Count, Honoring African-American Women Mathematicians. And it was inspired by Hidden Figures. And our students need role models, all types of role models. They need to see the brilliance, which was the name of the book I first told you about. They need to see the brilliance of diverse mathematicians.
Perfect over there. And when we look at math, math doesn't belong to anyone. Math is a universal language that belongs to us all. And sometimes I'll have some people say, "Oh, don't be talking about culturally relevant this," and I'll say, "Culture is not a pie." Do you understand it?
Yes.
Because if I embrace figures in Latino and Latina history, that's not taken away from anybody else. That's part of the whole culturally relevant is all of us.
Yes.
And it's a way for me to explain to people that what we're talking about is we're looking in our classrooms. We're saying who's in our classroom.
Yes.
So that's the stuff I just wanted to talk about. But one of the challenges of today, and we have so many things we're going to talk about, Shelley. But what I'm hearing in Connecticut all the time is about multilingual learners, and I'm not certain what are multilingual learners and why should we be concerned about them.
Well, let me tell you about multilingual learners. I was just on a panel discussion, and there was a report by the RAND Corporation, and the RAND Corporation did a widespread report all over the nation with principals and teachers. And one of the things they found out was that although principals focused on supporting and addressing the needs of students that are challenged with math, they did not specifically look at multilingual learners. So multilingual learners, that sort of went to the bottom, right? So in terms of what they wanted to address, they wanted to address the needs of struggling students. And sometimes multilingual learners are struggling students, but we need to bring up to the top. One of the priorities needs to be specifically not just struggling students, but multilingual students. And we can do that many ways. I was reading a book recently called Cultivating Mathematical Hearts, Culturally Responsive Math Teaching in Elementary Classrooms, and by Maria del Rosario Zavala and Julia Maria Aguirre. But the point I'm bringing that up is they're talking about culturally responsive math, but within the book, you'll see that there's a large focus on multilingual learners, because if we bring in their culture and we also address the language, the language they come with, right? We talk about, well, they have to learn English. They come with a language. And here they are they're going to be bilingual or trilingual. So we need to start with their strengths. We need to have them think in their language because that's what they're going to do. And so this particular book and others provides strategies for teachers to address the needs of multilingual learners specifically. Sometimes we need to call out exactly what we're talking about. And in this case, it's multilingual learners is one of the groups of students that we need to address and give a priority, not just lump them in with struggling learners, but we need to prioritize their needs as well. And we need to look at how do we teach the language and the math. A lot of times we talk about the literacy, but we also need to talk about math literacy, because when students are learning math language, there's a whole nother language that we're speaking when we're talking math. And even though we think of math as a universal language, there's some conventions that are different in different cultures. And teachers need to know that. They need to know that in some countries where we use a comma, this particular culture might use a decimal point. And so when we see a student putting a decimal point there, we think it's incorrect, but it's not incorrect for them. And so if we don't know about that, then we can't help that student. And even just looking at different vocabulary, math vocabulary, and how yard, just the word yard, Y-A-R-D, could mean the yard in your backyard, but it could also mean a yard as a linear measurement. And so we really have to be careful about saying that, oh, well, we're addressing their multilingual learners' needs with struggling learners. Well, no, they might have some very specific needs as well.
So multilingual students count and matter. And what I'm hearing you say is that when you practice culturally relevant mathematics, what you're really doing is studying the students in front of you in your classroom, finding out, and you're learning about them. So that's something
Absolutely.
that Cyril said, he who teaches never, learns, has to learn. So
Yes.
we're learning. So I hear that component to it. And I want to step back for a minute. Willis Moore from the Britain NAACP, a friend of ours,
Hmm.
sometimes Sean is on the show, but he's caught in some travel. But him and his wife wanted to ask something because I think I can only, his question is, what are some tasks, some methods families can use in teaching math, multiplication? And when I thought about that, I thought, Willis, I should be sending you this book.
Yes.
But what are some of the things? So what I'm saying is, asking is, give us some of the things that
Hmm. Hmm.
parents can do at home to make math motivation, engage, and
Hmm.
also culturally relevant.
Yeah. So you pick up the book. And what I've done in the book, Women Who Count, is I, first of all, want students to learn about the women, right? So the first three women mathematicians, the African American mathematicians, Dr. Martha Euphemia Lofton Haynes, Dr. Evelyn Boyd Granville, right? And so I want them to learn about the women because, first of all, they need to learn that there are smart people everywhere, which is actually what Dr. Granville said one time. She wanted everyone to know that we could be smart too. And she was specifically talking about Black women at that time. But I want them to also do all kinds of things like word puzzles. I want them to bring up math when they're cooking. I want them to bring up math when they're at a football game and they lose yardage. It means it's a negative. I'm going to take some yards off. So there are so many ways that we can help students sort of develop a mathematical identity by the things that they do every day. Marta Civil, she's a mathematician. She's a mathematics educator in Arizona, and she did lots of work with Latina parents, mothers, and rather than always have us, the teachers, the educators, teach the parents, she had the parents teach her. And so they were teaching her how to do doilies. They were little crochet things. And in them teaching her, she would go back and teach them the geometry, the symmetry. And so there's so many things that we already do in our everyday lives that is mathematical, spatial reasoning. I always laugh because my partner says, you really can fix that trunk really well. So when we're going on a vacation and I have to put everything in the trunk, I actually kind of visually look at what we need and look at the shapes and things like that. Those are all things that you have to talk to your children about. In addition to that, when they go to the library and they're looking for books, I have a book here, Sulway. You can't see it because I have on my, but I have a book here, Sulway,
That's it.
and I have my students, they're going to be teachers. I have them read a children's literature book, and then I have them think of where's the math. Well, in Sulway, they talk about colorism because Lupita Nyong'o, she's very dark skinned. And she really wanted to look like her sister that looked more like High Noon. And so I had one student who wrote a math lesson based on AM and PM, morning, night, light, dark, right? And just the fact that there were two times that there would be 12 o'clock, two times that there would be 8 o'clock. So when children are learning about AM and PM, you could start by reading the book Sulway. You also have a social issue in there about colorism, but then you can talk about AM and PM. What time do we brush our teeth? Maybe that's 7 a.m. What time do we go to bed? 8 p.m. And so those kinds of things are things that we do anyway, but we can talk about them. Elapsed time. How long does it take you to ride to school? 20 minutes. Whoa, if you started at 8, what time would you end? So those kinds of things. There's so much that we could do just talking through math, and certainly not saying I never liked math or anything like that, because what my mom would say, oh, I was always pretty good at math, but then she would call me about things and ask about the math. And now that I've talked to her over and over, she crocheted around a circular rug. And because I'm talking to her about that's just mathematical. Like, how did you get that into a circle? And so when you start to tell people about the math they're doing, they start to recognize and acknowledge, wait a minute, I'm doing a lot of math here. Of course, then we can add in, as the educator, we can add in circumference and diameter and pi and all these things, but start off with something that they already do. And that's what parents could do. That's what you can do at home. That's what you could do at the library. They're reading a book that they love to read, but then you can try to find the math in it and talk to your children about that.
And there is math all around us.
Mm-hmm.
We can't exist without math. So that what you're saying. And I'm also hearing though, you're saying that we need to begin where the learners are. And
Yes.
where are they with this math? And how can we connect to the math that's in their community? This whole idea, and I want to come to a point. Every year, or maybe every other year, the NAEP scores come out, and they love to scare us. And you can see this, the Harvard current. Oh my God, we are doing so poorly. We haven't done this poorly since 2002. They go on every time.
Mm-hmm.
And I usually say to parents, have you ever heard a good report from them?
Mm-hmm.
Has the Harvard Current, the New Haven, has anybody ever come out and said, well, the scores are rising really well and we're doing well? No, no, no. It's the nature, and this is what I'm gonna get at. The nature of the assessments that are evaluating how our students are doing. The ones that we most look at are really just single measures. Very nature, what we call psychometrics, designing these measures require massive failures. So we should never be surprised that more than half of the students have fallen below the mean. That's a non-reference, a criteria reference. Well, we shouldn't be surprised if 60, 70% of the students fail to, get above goal. But this idea of single measures of an assessments lead us into this deficit role. They've never motivated anybody. I haven't had one child say, oh my God, I took the S back today. I'm so happy. It was so much fun. No, that never happens. So could you talk about in the world of culturally relevant mathematics, what would be an assessment framework? What would it look like? Would it be balanced, or are these single measures the only things we need to look at?
Well, I'll talk about two things here. First, I will talk a little bit about the NAEP, just a little. So the average score for fourth grade. So we have fourth grade, eighth grade, and 12th grade. And in mathematics, the average score for fourth grade was lower compared to 2019. However, in 15 states, scores did increase. And so, like you said, we only hear the doom and gloom part of it. If you read the whole report, there are positive things in the report as well. Let me finish reading some of the statistics and then I'll tell you what I think about it. Okay. In eighth grade, again, the average score was lower for eighth grade math than compared to 2019. We all know that 2019, this was before the pandemic though, right? So before the pandemic, the grades were higher than they are now. And for some reason, everybody seems to be surprised by that. It's going to take a while for us to get back on track to where we were before the pandemic. But even before the pandemic, there were problems. So we can't just blame it all on the pandemic. And in 12th grade, the average score was 3 points lower than in 2019. Now, 2019, this was before the pandemic. So the doom is because at all grade levels, the scores for math are lower today in 2024 than they were in 2019. Let me tell you about a survey and a report that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation participated in or led through the Global Strategy Group. when they ask adults, now this was most of the adults and the teachers were from California, Florida, New York, and Texas, because these are the states that Gates works with. But most adults felt that the math currently taught in schools is outdated, and that they feel that the way math is taught needs to change. And so we have an organization called Just Equations. And I say all these names because I want people to look them up. And I want people to see from experts that it's not all doom and gloom, but we need to change some things, right? So when we look at the report from Just Equations, and this particular one is a blog, there are a few things they say we need to do in reference to the NAEP scores. We need to stop using outdated modes for teaching math. It can't just be lecture and writing on the board. Kids need to be more engaged. Kids need to be empowered. And I'm going to talk about the hope wheel at some point. Kids need to be hopeful. Also, kids, when they're surveyed, they feel disconnected from math. So what is that telling us? If the kids feel disconnected, they're not going to be engaged. We keep saying that math is not cultural, that it's neutral, and it's not. If you continue to bombard students with math and questions that they don't care about, they don't really want to find the answer. They just want to find it for the test, get a score, move on. But when you have issues that you use math to explore, oh, then we're on to something. Oh, I can explore football through math, or I can explore the Flint water crisis through math. And I could see that something that's inequitable through the math, and I can show that. When they asked middle school students, someone was doing they wanted to redo their curriculum, one lesson at a time. And so they asked the students, what are some things you have issues about? What are some things you have concerns about? And this was Turner. The last name is Turner. I don't remember the first name, maybe Aaron Turner. But anyway, so the middle school student said, these are all these things that we have issues with or concerns about. And one of the things they had a concern about was the overcrowding of their schools. This was something done years ago, article that was written years ago, but it always sticks with me because when you ask students, they will tell you. And so the teachers were able to write the lesson based on the overcrowding of the school. And the students were able to learn about area, perimeter, and things like that, right? Population based on the square footage of their hallways. One student who was never, her pseudonym was Angel, one student who was never involved in class, the teacher put her in charge because she says, Miss, I can never get to the bathroom and back because it's always so crowded. And so she became engaged because it was something she cared about. And so when we do things like that, when we're able to redesign, one of the things they said in the Just Equations blog is we need to redesign high school. So the National Council of Teachers of Math, NCTM, they have a whole book out on redesigning high school math. Now we need school districts buy-in. And we need them to think about broadening what they think of as math. And it can't just be symbol manipulation. We also need to detrack our classes and our teachers. So these are some of the things that NCTM talks about. We need to bring some joy into math. Can you believe it? The math organization talks about bringing joy into math. Yes, because even the experts understand that until we do that, we're going to keep losing kids. We're going to lose them because I would even go as far as to say some of them are traumatized by math. They tell me so. And so those are some of the things we need to do. We need to stop looking at just one report, the NAEP or Smarter Balance or whatever your state test is, because every state has to have a math test and a literacy test. But we need to look beyond that. We need that to inform our instruction. We need that to inform our policy. But we also need to look at classroom instruction The textbooks we choose, make sure they're culturally relevant, make sure students can see themselves in the math. If they always think math is somewhere over here and never here, why would they be interested in it? And so those are some of the things we need to consider in addition to the NAEP scores, in addition to the Smarter Balance, not just those test scores, but also how are students feeling about the math? Are they being empowered? Do they want to engage with the math? Do they want to find answers to the questions in the math class? We need to consider all those things.
So when we consider all those things, if we just look at single measures, what happens is, and when we look at those single measures, they do not talk to children. They do not talk to teachers. They do not talk to family members. You began by talking about the survey with Melissa Gates, and they talk to parents. They talk to people. So that important data that never gets told, that helps us understand how to motivate and engage and excite our learners and make mathematics joyful. That comes from teachers engaging in discussions and asking about attitudes and trying to change attitudes and all that. And so when I look at the single measures piece, I say that's sort of like a temperature. You can take your temperature and it could say you have a fever, but it can't tell you if you have cancer. It can't tell you if you have kidney problems. It can't tell you if you have a gallbladder problem. It can't tell you if you have an infection. It can just tell you that you have a fever, nothing else. That's why you go to the doctors. Doctors have to talk to you. How are you feeling? How's your throat feeling? How's your back feeling? All these kinds of things. And we're looking at single measures of data that seem to be driving an endless cycle of boring math. And I'm going to say that because Willis has asked me one more, our friend Willis Moore asked me to ask one more question. He defined you as a math superstar. He said, you are a math star. And so he wanted to know, when did you know you were a math star? And then he said, how can we help others know they're math stars?
Well, I think that teachers can help with that. Teachers can help with that by introducing students to diverse mathematicians. I have another story about an educator, and I'm sorry I don't have all the names. I just remember the stories. So a math educator who asked her students about, I think it was a Mexican American or a Mexican mathematician. Anyway, no, I know what it was. She was talking about Pythagoras, I think. And then one of the students, a male, I think it was high school, said, Miss, why are we always learning about these white dudes, right? In his mind, it's a white dude. And the teacher said, would it matter if I talked about a Mexican mathematician? And the student said, do you think there are any? That was very telling to her. So what she did was she had students look up mathematicians, any mathematician they wanted, and write a story about the mathematician. And she said, overwhelmingly, students chose a mathematician similar to them, whether it be because of their race or their gender. Students always chose a mathematician, or most of the time chose a mathematician that was like them in some way. And so we need to open up who's a mathematician, who is math for? It's not just for a test grade, or it's not to compete. Math doesn't have to be competitive. And a lot of math classrooms are competitive. So we look at a story like that and we see that we need to open up math so that students see themselves. There's a saying in math, and we talk about a mirror in a window. Oh, you know, Rudine Sims Bishop, right? Yeah. Windows, mirrors, and sliding doors. So we get it from her, but we sort of stole that from her and we use it in math. And we talk about how students need mirrors into the math classroom. They need to see themselves. They need their names inside the math problems, but we can't stop there. They need to see their interests, but we can't stop there. With culturally relevant math, we have to go beyond just interests and names to empowerment. We have to empower students and give them access to the math so they feel that they have agency. Even if they don't know what that word is, we know what it is, so that they have agency. And so that is something that we need to change in math. And so my colleague, mirrors, seeing themselves, and windows, it's okay for them to learn about others. But if it's always othering, if they never see themselves in the math, they think math belongs to others, right? So we have mirrors, context, mirrors, and context, others. Now, the hope wheel. I wanted to mention that. Is it okay if I mention it now? Okay. So my colleague Lou Matthews, he basically came up with the hope wheel during the pandemic because there were many students trying to learn math at home and online in virtual spaces, and they were struggling. And he said, how can we rethink what we're doing in math? And he came up with more hopeful verbs. So we think about Bloom's taxonomy, and they have their verbs that talk about the level of thinking. Well, these verbs are for hopeful intentions for your lessons. Verbs like love, protest, restore, invest, inspire, create. Most of us wouldn't think of those verbs when we are going to write a math lesson. But what we want to do, my colleagues and I, you see the book in back of me, Engaging in Culturally Relevant Math Tasks, we help teachers to see how they could use the hope wheel to frame the intention of the lesson. I'll give you an example. I had students, middle school students, and they had cameras, and they were disposable cameras. Go out, take some photos, bring them back. They weren't disposable cameras. They were I don't even know how to explain them, but bring them back. Oh, the kind that they come right out, the Insta something pictures. Anyway, so we wrote a grant and we bought these photos, and the students were able to take the photos come right out, and then they share them. This was during the pandemic, so we were online. And one little guy, he took a photo of his grandfather's vegetable garden. And when he described that vegetable garden, you should have seen the love that he had for his grandfather. It was screaming through the screen. And he talked about how neat the garden was and how his grandfather would keep them in neat rows. And we talked about how the rows could be arrays, which are just columns for when you're multiplying. And we have some middle schoolers who still struggle with multiplication. If there's any teachers on the line, give me a thumbs up. And so we need any method possible that we can use to get students to think about, when we talk about multiplication facts, it's not just a memorization, it's a visual. So if Aiden is the little guy's name. If Aiden could remember his grandfather's garden when he's thinking about multiplication and talk about rows of something and how many are in each row, that might help him to remember that multiplication is not just this thing that you memorize, but it's an actual something. It tells me something about grandfather's garden. So those are some of the things that I'm talking about. When we equip teachers with more ways of thinking about how to bring students' lived experiences into the classroom, then we can bring more hope into the classroom. One more example, if I can. I have my students go out, and I call it a community walk. It's not something that I made up. Some other researchers did. So I have them go out and do a community walk. And I say, find the math in the community where you work. So that when you mention this particular place, Lake Quasapa, Quasi, whatever it is, when you mention those places, the students will know about that place. But then you can figure out Castle Craig. One of my students came with a picture with Castle Craig. And what we did was we looked at the height of Castle Craig based on ratio and proportion, right? And so we were able to have students use math in a familiar setting. And so they see that there's math everywhere, including in their own neighborhood.
Right, and it makes perfect sense to me. It's whenever I had to paint something in the house, I would call my grandfather, and he would say, "Okay, measure the width of the room."
Mm-hmm.
measure the length of the room, and then he'd say, "This is how much paint you need." Same thing with anything I would do. I laid a patio in the yard, same stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I've laid floors, wood floors, and tile floors in our homes, and the
Mm-hmm.
same stuff. I would call him, and he would have that practical mathematics,
Mm-hmm.
and he would be almost to the T. Tell me so that I only had to return very few, and often maybe a couple of tiles in case something happened. I would hold on to
Sure.
them. But he used mathematics to do, and it reminds me of uh, Jamie Escalante, the famous LA math
Mm-hmm.
teacher in the movie Stand and Deliver.
Yes.
What people may not remember, because we look at a movie, we get the idea that his students, the California whatever achievement test or the
Mm-hmm.
SATs,
Mm-hmm.
the honors math class, they could not believe that his students, who were primarily Chicano students,
Mm-hmm.
had scored the highest in the state, and so they came to him, they questioned him, and then they made him do it again, and the same results happen. But
Mm-hmm.
when you look a little deeper behind the scenes, you see that Mr. Escalante was having the students count the tiles and the floors in all the hallways of the
Mm-hmm.
school and changing it to mathematics equations, and
Uh-huh.
he applied mathematics to the physical world.
Mm-hmm.
He connected it to, well, your father's a welder. Well, when he welds, how much gas is in the tank? What goes on? He did
Yes,
that all
yes,
the
yes.
time. I made that connection. And there's a researcher, Lewis Malls, who
Mm-hmm.
talks about funds of knowledge and says that
Mm-hmm.
all of our communities come with these
Mm-hmm.
funds of knowledge. And guess what? Our
Yeah.
communities, black, white, yellow, all colors, have mathematicians, these
Mm-hmm.
math stars that Willis was asking about over there. My grandfather was a math star. That's a bridge painter, high up in the sky and stuff, but he could always tell you whatever you needed to buy at the store. So I
Mm-hmm.
get that kind of component here. And he was the math star in our family in terms of that. And it's funny
Mm-hmm.
because my grandfather was born in the 1890s. And so we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about someone whose education was third grade over
Sure.
there,
Mm-hmm.
So somehow he's the math star in the family. Could always figure that out, percentages. So whenever
Mm-hmm.
we can make that connection, that's what I'm hearing when you talked about the hope wheel. How do we inspire? How do we help them come to invest in mathematics, create through mathematics?
Sure.
Use mathematics as a protest. When you did our TED, you did a CCSU TED talk for
Uh-huh.
us. And by the way, you're the number one viewers of our CCSU TED talk. You outnumber, you're three times the amount of the closest person to you. Over 60,000 views of your TED talk.
Wow.
But
Nice.
in that component, you talked about this all the time. You
Yes.
talked about because you're not only in Connecticut, you've been to Africa,
Yes,
been to
yes.
Central America. You
Mm-hmm.
seem to do mathematics around the world. So can we connect this then? Because there's another piece when we look really deep
Mm-hmm.
into your bio, we start finding out that you had a connection between music and math. Is that right? Did you have that? Because I'm going to tell you, I learned Spanish. I've
Yeah.
got A's in my Spanish class because
Yes.
Mrs. Sanchez, I had her for 2 years. At the last 5 minutes of class, she used to throw on Fanny All Stars. These are the Latin musicians. She said, "Get up and
Yes.
dance." And
Yes.
we'd be
Yes.
dancing, and I just would do anything for that woman
Sure.
because of the music connection. I did like Fanny All Stars, or famous
Mm-hmm.
Latin salsa community. It's not even a group; it's all the stars of
Sure. Sure.
salsa. But anyway, that little dance. So what ways can we
Oh,
engage in that hope language? Because now I'm
yes, yes.
saying something. I'm hearing something that's profound. I'm
Oh,
saying we
okay.
were
Let's
teaching. Yeah, go ahead.
think about inspire, and that's what I hear you saying. So I might use math and music to inspire students, right? And there's a lot of connections. First of all, there are lots of mathematicians who are also musicians, right? And I know at the joint meetings of math with the AMS and the MAA, and I don't know if it's still the joint meetings because I usually attend NCTM, but anyway, they have an annual meeting, and I know I've at least at one of their meetings they had a whole production of math and music, but it was geometry. It was almost like a ballet. and all of the dancers were doing moves where you can see the geometry of their bodies, angles and parallel and perpendicular and so forth. So I tell you, you can find math almost anywhere. But in terms of math and music, think about fractions and the number of beats. And so my partner is a musician, and me being a math educator, it was just easy for us to talk about the connections with math and music. And for a few years, and I really want to bring it back up. For a few years, we were doing workshops with teachers, but then we would also go into classrooms to test it out with students. And I got to tell you, students love music. And so you find the music appropriate for school that they can listen to, and then you find the beat. You talk about clapping and finding the beat, and you see the smiles come across their face, right? But then we find the beat, or we have a measure of music or a bar, which, whichever you call it. And if we have 4/4 time and we have a half note and a quarter note, well, what's missing? We have a quarter note. And then if you have a dotted note, if you have a dotted half note, you have a half note plus half of a half note. So they have to know that half of a half is a fourth. A lot of students will know number of beats or how to do the beats, but they might not connect it to fractions. But what we do in our little curriculum is we say, and these are like thematic units. We say, okay, tell us about the number of beats, but then write the fraction equation after. So they would have to write 1/2 plus 1/4 plus 1/4 would equal 4/4. So it was a lot of fun. When we did this at Atomic, Associated Teachers of Math in Connecticut, we did it at an Atomic conference, and it was basically what you would call sold out. There were teachers sitting on the floor. I don't know if they were supposed to, fire hazard, but teachers were sitting in the back of the room on the floor. All the seats were done because teachers want to know how to connect to students. And music is certainly a way to connect to students. And so, yeah, I love the math and music curriculum that we had, I think 4 units. And of course, you have the fractions, and then you have the translations. How with a translation, basically, it's sort of like a flip. So you have something over here and you flip it, and then you play it back the other way. And what Dunn used to do, we would have students write a 4-bar song using fractions and using the notes, and then he would play it back for them on a melodica. And so he would ad lib a little bit, and they could even write words to the songs, and they would love it. And we at CCSU, we used the math lab. There was a math lab, and there's a computer there, and they can do all kinds of drumming and hear different sounds. It was fabulous. The students always loved it. We had a full day of that at CAMPY, the Connecticut Association of Mathematically Precocious Youth. We did a 2.5 hour workshop. We did it 2 or 3 times, and every time we would have a full house, and the students absolutely loved it.
So they loved it. And while we mentioned that partner of yours, that is the amazing Dunn Pearson, the Black Beethoven, famous OJ's person, and an amazing person. And I'm sure I'm going to have Dunn on the show, and I'll make a math connection on that table. But it's not just anybody in that sense, but this connection of math and music. It's with everything. It's across the board. We can find in music, connect it. Like you said, let's make sure it's appropriate. So I use music when I taught on the Tohoto O'odham Reservation at the high school, and I would play my music because my music at the time was Bob Marley and stuff. It was always mellow, calm, and fun. The kids loved it, and so they say, "What about our music?" I said, as long as there's no swearing, as long as nobody's getting killed, no one's getting hurt, we're not doing anything like that, you can do it. And they came up with some of the most amazing stuff. And of course, it was a way that it was the best way to have my students write and think and engage and read in the classes. It just had that stuff. So there is this connection. So when I'm looking at this, because now this is where pedagogy comes into it. When I look at those NAEP scores, and I look at the way we traditionally have been teaching reading and writing and mathematics, maybe everything. And we're focused on the skills and we're focused on a curriculum of content. It's void of almost emotions. So my students on the reservation, when we talked about, they come back from the history class and say, we're in the class of the white lies. And I said, what's that? but we'd have conversations. Well, are you going to give us any more white authors? Don't you know any native authors? And as soon as that popped up there and said, let me give you Sherman Alexie. This is a famous Smoke Signals. The movie is one of Sherman Alexie, and my students just lit up, and I could hold them in the palm of my hand. So this pedagogy that connects to who our students are culturally, right? And to step back just before we do that, in literacy, I'm fond of telling policymakers, our teachers do not pick the curriculum. They really have very little say over the curriculum. You pick the curriculum. You fund the curriculum. And what my teachers really can do is how. The how. And I say the how. Teachers have this amazing power. So I see this pedagogy, culturally relevant mathematics pedagogy. You talked about joy. You talked about hope. You talked about love. You talked about inspiring. So tell us about how does a culturally relevant pedagogy inspire teachers to teach?
I think it's because first of all, cultural relevance does not take away from the mathematics rigor. So I want to dispel that, first of all. We want it to be what we call cognitively demanding, right? And so students are not afraid of thinking, but they just want to be thinking about something that matters to them. And also, they want to know why it works many times, right? A lot of times it's just do it this way to get the answer, but they want to know the why. So if we teach them from a conceptual approach, meaning we're trying to get them to understand why. And I know sometimes, especially today, people will say Common Core math, and it has a negative connotation because they're like, oh, if I add, 23 and 18, why can't I just add the 3 and the 8, carry the 1? Well, carry 1 what? We're carrying 110, right? And we're carrying it to the tens place. We want to make sure that when we're talking and when we're having students learn math, that they're understanding why they're doing what they're doing with the place value or whatever it is that they're doing. And so, yes, we are doing math different ways, but hopefully it's to get students to understand not just another procedure. See, because you can break up the numbers and find partial sums and still make it very procedural. And we don't want that. We don't want it to be just another procedure. We want it to be a way that students will learn the math so that they're connecting to what the math actually is, using manipulatives, even sixth grade, even middle school. They still need visuals sometimes. So we're trying to make sure that we teach in ways where there's not only one way to show that you know something, right? Because some students are more abstract thinkers. Some students are more visual thinkers. And so to be culturally relevant means we're tapping into different students. We're learning about who they are and how they best learn. Also, even at the school level, we need principals, we need district level, we need to tap in to families more and find out, how we can leverage that family, that funds of knowledge you talked about, how we can leverage that. And so if we can bring all of those things in, a lot of times it happens during curriculum writing, over the summer when teachers are getting paid to do it, right? Curriculum writing where they're taking, and I've been involved in curriculum writing with different districts where they come together with the student, with students, with sometimes with community and parents, with teachers, with professors like me, and they come together and they write these lessons that are still rich, cognitively demanding, but also they're really getting the mathematics out of it. So, I mean, Jesse, there's so much to do with the pedagogy. It's not just one thing. It's bringing in students' math identity. It's bringing in funds of knowledge. So there's lots of things that you can do um, in the classroom so that students are understanding the math more than just trying to get an answer. And one of the things is getting rid of like these quick time tests, like these minute things, mad minutes and stuff,
Man,
because some students are traumatized by that. I don't know. I mean, some students love it, but there's just some things that we really don't need to do. Like if you have kids crying over it, why are you doing stuff that making kids cry? Like, so we can change like little things and we can do it a different way.
we can change, we can do different things. We're coming
Mhm.
down to our rapid fire moment, but just in that mad math minute, my daughter hated the math minute, loved math, and fell in love with Albert Einstein because she said it took him 10 years to figure out that theory of relativity. And I would remind her,
See?
he's from physics. He's not really a mathematician. But anyway, she did love that. And when we looked at her stuff, when I say we weren't looking at all the data, the math teacher was just looking at, and this is not her fault. This is what
Mhm.
they've been told to do. Did you get them all in a minute? And what I would show our daughter is you got them all right. You
Yes.
did 38 of them and you got them all right. I don't see one wrong. And
Right.
so that's that component along there. But if you had to give us, and I do want to say when high stakes testing, those NAEP scores, when they drive the curriculum,
Hmm.
the last show I had your new dean, the new dean
Uh-huh.
school of ed,
Yes, yes.
John Burrell on, and it was funny. Dean Burrell was talking about how those assessments often do not motivate teachers or children,
Mm.
do not build school climate and culture. But anyway, Shelley, sort of in a minute, what what's your best advice to a young undergraduate math teacher
Hmm.
that's coming into your classes now, and then do a graduate too? So we've got one
Well,
pre-service teacher and one teacher.
to really get to know their students when they're out student teaching, to get to know their students and see how they can connect to the students. But for the undergraduates, I really want them to get to know and love math because many of them come in not, really loving math because they've only learned procedures. And then for the grad students, I love for them to do action research with their students. Try something new. Try vertical boards where they're standing up all the time rather than always sitting down. I have a teacher that one of her students has ADHD and she has this ball where he can stand on. And she said just using that ball, he went from 5 or 7 minutes of times where he can like focus to the whole 40, 45 minutes because he's always trying to stay on that ball and also doing the work. Try something new. Try to connect to your students, bring in new things that, sort of novel, what you wouldn't think of in math. So those are some of the things that I would suggest.
I want to say thank you for being our guest today. Of course, Dr. Jones. I always love hanging out with you at Central or anywhere else. Love hanging out with Dunn, and I love these conversations. I want to say a shout out to New Haven. You are the most brilliant city. I know she's from Bridgeport, so but right now I'm going to say that New Haven is the most brilliant city. And by the way, if you go to Possible Futures, and in
Uh-huh.
Possible Futures, you can get one of these books by Randy Weingarten, Why Fascists Fear Teachers. And they're having I think 2 sessions. I'll find out on the next show when they are. But AFT New Haven will give you a copy of the book to join the book discussion. Guess what? Dr. Turner is going to be at that book discussion. It's all good, folks. I hope that. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
There's something happening here, but what it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop, children. What's that sound? Everybody, look what's going